I am a writer and a mental health counselor. My profession and interests both entail me to delve deep into the human heart and mind. This has been a very remarkable and rewarding journey of the self for me. I like to see the workings of the inner us as these small threads running, intersecting within us. These threads sometimes entangle, at times intertwine, conjoin, and even snap to create who we are and make the whole as the world sees us as. The human psyche is very much like the universe itself. There is so much that we still need to know of, so much that we need to understand more of. It is so uncertain and unpredictable that every day there is the possibility of something new and exciting being discovered, which has the potential in it to change the entire trajectory of the way we perceive things. Till a recent time ago, we were told that strong is powerful. Today, I stand here to tell you to be vulnerable and to embrace the power that comes with it. What we are about to unfold today has the potential in it to change our lives in a significant and powerful way. In order to understand vulnerability, we first have to talk about the notion of invulnerability. Human beings, since time immemorial, have seen themselves as the invincible, the invulnerable ones. We are at the top of the hierarchy, the animal hierarchy. We always perceive of ourselves as being the best. We have tamed all other species. We have even tried to tame nature in accordance with our own whims and fancies. We see no one above us. And it is this invulnerability that, through social conditioning, has come down to us even in these times when we no longer fight wars or we no longer foray into the forests to kill animals for food in order to prove our own supremacy. But still, the social conditioning is so deep that it is embedded somewhere out there. And it is always the perfection that we are aiming at. We are always trying to be the invulnerable man, the invulnerable woman that society wants us to be. Being invulnerable has destroyed many of families, many relationships, many human beings, and this creates a dangerous chain reaction. When we are trying to be invulnerable, we are showing the one who comes after us that invulnerability is the norm. Now, what is being vulnerable? I like to see as being vulnerable as having that very honest and open conversation with a trusted friend or a mentor or a family person with whom we can talk about our deepest insecurities, our fears, our regrets, the mistakes that we may have made. When we can have that kind of open and honest conversation with someone is the place where we are being vulnerable. I love the way Ashton Kutcher has put it, that vulnerability is the art of being uncalculated, the art of being foolish, the courage to say, this is me, and I am being open and honest enough in front of you. And so it is up to you whether you accept me the way I am or not. And most importantly, by being vulnerable, what we are trying to do is, we are trying to tell the counterpart that this is what I bring to the table and this is what I cannot bring to the table. And if you can, please compliment me on what I lack. Now, why do vulnerabilities set in? As I said earlier, vulnerability sets in the process of being invulnerable. We are always trying to reach that stage of perfection, that stage of invulnerability that is so conditioned into us that we forget that as humans, we are ultimately vulnerable. Now, what is important to understand is that vulnerability sets in because of various reasons. Some of the vulnerabilities we are born with. It is there in our DNA. We cannot do anything about it. And some of it sets in the process of growing up. So it's an eternal battle between nature and nurture. What is important for us to understand as caregivers, as educators, and as parents is that the ages between 1 to 10 are very decisive and very crucial in a child's life. These are the ages which are just seen as a child having fun and being pampered and loved, but we are not seeing these ages as those defining period of time when the personality of the child is silently being formed. We do not see children as very significantly building up their own personalities during these years. We start thinking about the child's personality only when the child comes up to the preteens, or especially during the teens. We are very, very bothered by an aggressive teen or a fearful teen or a shy teen. We are bothered when the children reach their teenage. But what the teenager does today is a result of the background that has already been made since the day he or she was born. Sadly enough, in our society, no one teaches us to become parents. We become parents on a whim. We may talk about financial stability of whether we can afford to have a baby or not. We may talk even about the space, that whether we have that kind of space or not in the house in order to bring a baby in. But we are not talking about the mental and emotional preparedness of the parents in order to become parents. And then again, having a baby, going through a marriage, taking up a new job or starting a new business setup, all these are trigger points for vulnerabilities. We are not talking about vulnerability, and so these moments when something new happens to us are the moments when these vulnerabilities are actually triggered. So immediately when we become parents, our own vulnerabilities get triggered. So we, in a space when we are still not dealing with our vulnerabilities in a right way, how can we even think about the child who is growing up and maybe absorbing the vulnerabilities that are there on display? Why is it important to be vulnerable? It is important to be vulnerable, first of all, in order to have a confident approach towards life. If I can understand what my problem areas are, I will definitely work on them. I must work on them. If I want to have a good relationship with my peers or at my workplace or with my parents, and most importantly, if I want to have a complete relationship of acceptance with myself, then I have to be vulnerable at some point or the other. I must understand that running after perfection, trying to be the invulnerable person, is not something which is achievable. It is never achievable to be perfect, to be invulnerable. We cannot do that. We have to be vulnerable at some point in time. So in order to have a satisfying life, in order to be in a space where you not only accept yourself, but are very, very confident of who we are, we have to understand our vulnerabilities. It is only when we start becoming vulnerable that we break the false walls of defense mechanism that we put up with us. It is so easy to be angry when things do not go our way. It is so easy to bang the phone on someone. It is so easy to walk out of the room. It is so easy to land a punch on someone. But what is difficult is to accept that the situation is not working for me, and to walk away from the situation, not from accepting the fact that I may be vulnerable and that these situations may be my trigger points. So if being vulnerable is such a nice thing, why are we not being more vulnerable? Why are people not talking about vulnerability? It should be spoken of more if it is such a great thing which can give us a great relationship, which can make us more confident as human beings. The problem is that we have been so deeply conditioned that we refuse to see any kind of weakness in us. Think of the invulnerable humans. Think of how we have been conditioned even before our birth. Think of the baby showers that we have. The decorations are all in blue if it is a male baby, and the decorations are all in pink if it is a female child. So right before our birth, someone has cast the molds of perfection. A man has to behave in a certain way. He has to be the alpha male, and the female has to behave in a certain way. She has to be the superwoman. So the mold has already been cast, and it is this mold, this touchstone that we are always trying to achieve. And this is what stops us from looking into our weaknesses. It is the gap that we understand. I am vulnerable, but I have to reach the point of invulnerability. It is the gap that ultimately stops us from looking at our own weaknesses. And this is one thing but which it is extremely difficult to do, but very, very important. It is like power dressing. When we dress up in a good manner, we feel good about ourselves. We feel confident about ourselves. So in the same way, if we are armored with the right kind of attitude, which we will get only after we can talk about our vulnerabilities in the right way, that we will be armored with a confident personality and have a relationship with others which is satisfying and very, very powerful. Now, is there a healthy way to be vulnerable? Many people try to use vulnerability as a manipulative technique. So we must understand these two things when we are talking about vulnerability. The first one is that vulnerability, being vulnerable, is not a manipulative technique. It is not like you say, okay, fine, now I have told you that I have these insecurities, I have a sense of regret, I have anger issues, I am fearful of certain things. So now that I have spoken about my vulnerabilities, it is up to you to deal with me. And it is up to you to take care of me. No, it doesn't work that way. Looking at one's own vulnerability and talking about it is just a way of understanding oneself so that we can work on it. When I first got to know that I was bad in mathematics, my first instinct was to run away from the subject and not practice it at home. The day I realized that I have to deal with it in order to get the kind of marks that I was looking at in the exams, I have to deal with the most dreaded thing in the entire subject list, and that is mathematics. So, looking at our vulnerabilities is a way of dealing with it. It is not like, okay, fine, I've spoken about my vulnerability and I'm done with it. No. Talking about my vulnerability is the first step that I'll take in order to make things better for myself. Again, the other thing which I was talking about is being vulnerable is not a magical wand to magically solve all our problems. Being vulnerable is not going to solve the problems for us. Being vulnerable is to be on the path where our problems will be solved. So there is something called healthy vulnerability. Now, how do we identify our vulnerabilities? This requires some kind of introspection. In today's world, we are so engaged with looking at others, we are so engaged at judging others that we hardly have time for our own selves. We do not look into ourselves. We do not have those heart-to-heart conversations with friends or mentors where we are talking to one another about our own responses as human beings in different situations. So, in order to identify our vulnerabilities, we have to look deep into ourselves. Journaling is supposed to help a lot of people. People write down about their daily activities, the kind of situations that they may have encountered in their lives on a particular day, and the kind of responses that they had. So this has helped a lot of people. Talking to a trusted friend or a mentor has always helped, because these are the people who see us react in certain situations. These are the people who can tell us, okay, you made a mistake there. You were very aggressive. You are so shy of this. You should have done it this way. So if we can talk to people who we really trust and respect, that can be a way of finding our own vulnerabilities. Some people may also need professional guidance. But the most important thing that we can do is to explore our own triggers. What is it that triggers us? What is it that makes me angry? What is it that makes me fearful? So once you have identified these vulnerabilities, you can work on them. So what are some of the examples of being vulnerable? One is to be able to talk honestly about how you feel from inside. The second would be to accept the fact that you may have weaknesses as a human being. We all do. There is nothing called perfection, and we should not ever strive for it. Admitting to making mistakes. Okay, I made a mistake. I was a bully there. I was unnecessarily aggressive there. We have to stop somewhere and assess our own actions. Reconciling from past trauma. As I said, so much of our personality is formed between the ages of 1 to 10. So it is during this period that we are exposed to a great deal of personality making behaviors. And if we can revisit the past, and if we can come to terms with the trauma that may have shaped us in a particular way, if we can look at the past with an objective eye, that also helps. And once we start doing that, I think so much of the trauma has automatically healed. Admitting to feelings of shame, anger, guilt, and the like. And being able to tell the other person in a very, very respectful manner that you were wrong. I do not agree to you. Being able to say no. These are areas where we are being vulnerable, but we are standing for ourselves. So what do we do now? Now that we have identified our vulnerabilities, we know that it's important to be vulnerable, and we have identified our vulnerabilities. So what do we do now? What if a trusted friend was telling you about her own vulnerabilities? How would we react? Very often than not, we are very, very critical of oneself. We are very critical of ourselves and not as much of the other person. So try to love yourself. Learn to love yourself. Learn to live with the fact that you are vulnerable, that you may have made a mistake in the past, which you shouldn't have. You have hurt someone unnecessarily. Try to live with that and see to it that maybe you can go back and maybe you can say sorry to the person. Or if that looks impossible, maybe you can move on and have a better space in your life. The next time you come across a situation like that, your responses would be better. Now that we have identified our vulnerabilities, we have to work on ourselves. Let's work on ourselves. Let's work on the anger that we have. Let's work on the fear that we have. Let's work on the issues of guilt and regret and shame that we have. And what I have learned in all these years is that when we are being vulnerable, the majority of the people look at it with empathy rather than being critical and judgmental. We are scared of people's judgments and criticisms, and that's why we refrain from being vulnerable. But a large majority of the people empathize. And what happens when we are vulnerable? Once we start getting vulnerable, once we start identifying the group that we do not belong to, once we have the ability in ourselves to say no, we will attract the right kind of people in our life. We will be more confident. We will belong. To conclude, if it is such a powerhouse of strength, why are we not using it more? I think we should. we should try and be more and more vulnerable. We should try and look deep into ourselves and try to find out our own triggers so that we can have a better relationship with ourselves, so that we can have a better relationship with everyone around us, with our peers, our family, our workers, and all of them. So the door to making this change lies within us. No one else, but you can affect the change in yourselves. So I encourage you all to take this step today itself. Embrace your own vulnerabilities and pave a way towards a powerful, meaningful relationship with yourself as well as the world in general. So spread the fire now. Go get vulnerable. Thank you.